僕ですか?
Tondagosa. I'm Kody NOKOLO, and this is MOTHER². Today, I'll be reading my exclusive interview with Kasey Ozymy, creator of the 2018 Motherlike indie game, Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass. This is part of a series of interviews with Motherlike indie developers I'll be bringing to you this summer. Next month, I'll be reading my interview with the creator of Citizens of Earth, Ryan Vandendyk. Then after that, you'll hear my interview with the creator of Lisa the Painful, Austin Jorgensen. And, in September, expect to hear a discussion over a call I had with the developers of a surprise final Motherlike game. Hope you'll look forward to them. So, now my questions to Kasey Ozymy. First I asked, where did you first discover the Mother series, and how did you feel during your first experience with it? He said, I was in 4th or 5th grade when Earthbound came out. I remember the This Game Stinks ad, and I know a lot of people were put off by it, but I thought it was a neat advertisement. I was voraciously consuming every RPG that came out on the SNES at that point, so once I saw that it was an RPG, it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to get it. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I was playing every RPG I could find, even obscure ones like 7th Saga, and Earthbound was easily one of the best RPGs on the SNES. At the time, I think the thing that really captured my imagination was that you could have an RPG set in modern times. Most everything else was either a medieval fantasy or a sci-fi setting at that point, so this was really novel to me, and I remember my imagination running wild after that. I enjoyed the weirdness and the humor of it as well, but at the time, that setting is what really stuck out to me. Next question, do you have a favorite game in the series, and why? He said, it's hard to pick between Earthbound and Mother². I have a lot of nostalgia for Earthbound since I played it when I was younger. The Mother² translation patch came out when I was in my early 20s. That said, I think that Mother³ is a stronger game in terms of writing. Earthbound had a lot of good moments, but Mother³ had more developed characters. Plus, I think it was really trying to say something important, which I appreciate. Third question, what are some of your favorite characters, songs, locations, and moments from the series? His answers? I think that some of the strongest characters in the series are the antagonists. Facade's got an interesting arc, and Porky's growth from annoying neighbor to evil avatar of capitalism was fun to watch and legitimately on-point satire. In terms of music, I'm a sucker for battle themes, so I have to mention Porky Means Business. I just love the dynamics in that one. Onett theme probably enters my head at least once a week. Earlier I mentioned that the setting of Earthbound really stuck out to me as a kid, so Onett might be one of my favorite locations. It's so banal in the context of Earthbound, which goes to some pretty crazy places, but in the context of RPGs as a whole, there's something oddly riveting about walking through a fairly normal town and getting into fights with the local gang. The best level in the series, though, is Tane Tane Jungle from Mother². It's such a fun premise, and was a constant stream of novelty that kept me engaged, which I think is what thoughtful design is all about. The perfect Chimera level is a very close second. As for my favorite moments, I think the scene that hit me the hardest in Mother³ was the sunflower scene. That longing for a lost parent, that really got me. I also loved Rope Snake's monologue. In Earthbound, I thought that having you transmit your consciousness into robots added a lot of stakes to the final encounter, which I loved. The Your Sanctuary locations also did a great job of having a feeling of great weight. Next question, did you ever interact much with the community on starmen.net? If so, what was your first impression of that community? He said, I'm aware of starmen.net, but I never posted there or anything. Seemed like nice people. Fifth question, what were your favorite experiences you've had with the Mother community? He said, I haven't really interacted much with the Mother community. As a game developer, I spend most of my days slaving away alone in a horrid cesspit of my own creation. Question 6. Our website and members of its community have been discovering many previously lost pictures and information about the N64 version of Mother³ recently. Do you have any strong opinions or other thoughts on that version of the game? His reply, I remember seeing a write-up in a game magazine forever ago about Earthbound 64, including some screenshots, and I wanted it more than anything, especially after the 64's truly abysmal selection of RPGs. But it didn't happen and I made peace with that. Mother³ wound up being a fantastic game, and I know a lot of people get stuck on the what if of the N64 version. But if that came out, then the Mother³ we know wouldn't have come out. And a lot of those early 3D games are kind of rough around the edges. So my thoughts as an adult are that we may have been lucky in the long run to have gotten what we got, but yeah, the idea of a 3D Mother game is still exciting. Question 7. What were your expectations of Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass before finishing it, and how did the completed game differ from those expectations? He said, "When I was first making Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass, the plan was to make a 6 to 8 hour experience that was going to be released for free, mainly for the benefit of other developers and RPG Maker fans on rpgmaker.net. The idea was to show people where I was as a developer, musician, and writer, and hopefully pull some people together to work on a larger commercial project together, since I wanted a path to move from amateur to professional game development. Partway through development, I made another game for a contest. The game was called The Heart Pumps Clay, and it had some proto-Jimmy design ideas in it, but it wasn't particularly well received. It did give me some practice with art though, so I figured that if I couldn't leverage the game to get a team, I could just try to do everything myself, and that's what I ended up doing. All of that is to say that the early version of Jimmy was just way different, so the end result turned from a short collection of interconnected games spanning different genres that were all centered around Jimmy's experiences with his family to a full-blown RPG. The focus was still mainly about Jimmy's experiences with his family, but I ended up saying a lot more about childhood in general, and aesthetically it ended up being way different. You can see some of the old art and stuff in a link in the description. Question 8. Do you have any favorite parts of your games that you didn't think too much about but players seem to enjoy more than expected? Kasey said, "I like to think that I tried to keep everything intentional and filled with love for both the game itself and the players, so most of the things that people really latched onto were things that I knew would be good. Punch Tanaka's popularity immediately comes to mind. That said, I did have a weapon for Andrew called the Encyclopedia set, which basically gives him a huge attack boost and turns a more magic-oriented attacker into a physical one. I thought, this will be a neat little build that people can make. I didn't expect it to be as popular as it was, and I certainly didn't expect Andrew to be called Mandrew after this build got popular, and I really certainly didn't expect the Mandrew fan art featuring the bookish paleontologist as an absolutely ripped nerd." Question 9. Are there many times where it's difficult for you to get motivated to make things, and is there anything you tend to do to get yourself motivated when you need to work on something? He said, "I definitely feel the lack of motivation at times. The amount of stuff that you have to do to get a full-length RPG off the ground, it can be pretty overwhelming. Additionally, there's stuff that you just don't want to do. For me, art assets were always tough since I had to face my own limitations. For my current game, I'm working with some other people, so luckily a lot of that is off my plate, but I'm just about at the point where I need to chip in with the art, and it's mentally taxing to have to deal with my own inadequacies. Business stuff can also be taxing for an introvert like me. There's no magic solution to getting over those things other than just plowing through. A lot of game development is monotonous, but you just have to do it because the other choice is just not to make a game. Also, when you've been doing this long enough, you get the opposite problem. When I'm not working on my game for a few days, I start to get itchy. I just feel like I'm not working towards my goal in life. I feel like I'm getting nowhere, so I have to work. It's not a bad problem to have, but it does mean that I get caught up in these 5+ year projects that no sane person would attempt." 10th question. Did you deliberately decide to include any particular Mother tropes in your games? He said, "I don't know if I intentionally tried to mimic any tropes from Mother. The final showdown with the Pulsating Mass does have a similar feel to Gyges, but the resolution is way different. I originally was going to have an additional encounter between Buck and Jimmy, but it felt too borrowed from the Lucas Klaus fight, so I ended up ditching it. Since I was borrowing so heavily aesthetically from the Mother series, I found myself trying to actively avoid seeming like I was ripping it off. There are some larger things, like a general bizarreness to the dialogue, which contribute to this game being Motherlike. But considering that this game is set in the imagination of an 8-year-old, it had to be bizarre. Still, there's probably a lot of subconscious borrowing that went on. Jimmy was definitely inspired by the Mother series." Question 11. Which aspects of the Mother series were the most inspiring for you? Kasey said, "More than anything, the aesthetics. I think that was one of Earthbound's greatest gifts. It showed us that stylized graphics could be just as effective at storytelling and gameplay as the push for realism." Final question. Do you have any plans for future game projects, or anything else in particular that you're working on and would like to mention? If so, do you think the Mother influence will continue into those next projects in any specific ways? He said, "I do. I'm currently working on another full-length RPG. I'm still likely a couple months out from an announcement, so follow me on Twitter at Kasey Ozymy and I'll release more info on that soon. It's not going to be influenced much by the Mother series, but it's going to be pretty heavily influenced by Chrono Trigger mechanically and a lesser-known SNES franchise called Lenus aesthetically. My basic pitch is that it's going to be based on an alien planet where the player will play insectoid creatures with tentative grasps on the concept of empathy. It's going to have an interesting alien atmosphere, and have a lot of unique mechanics built around that. I'm really looking forward to sharing more about it in the future. And that's all for my interview with Kasey Ozymy. What do you think? Anything he mentioned that really piqued your interest? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to follow him on Twitter through the link in the description. Subscribe to see more Mother news and my interviews with Motherlike indie game developers soon. This has been Kody NOKOLO. Potential